Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, the United Way and the Mass Association of Community Development Corporations, today for a spotlight on the Community Investment Tax Credit. I'm Bob Giannino, the new, I guess I'm only going to be able to say that for a little while longer, new president and CEO of the United Way of Mass Bay and Merrimack Valley. It's an honor to be with you all today, and I'm excited for today's conversation. We're particularly grateful that folks could join us in this new environment. I hesitate to call it the new normal because I certainly doesn't feel particularly normal, but we're all balancing our virtual work, our remote learning with children that we have at home. And it says a lot that you're deciding to join us today to learn a little bit more about what you can do to help families and communities emerge from the crisis stronger and more resilient than before. From unprecedented health crisis to a racial justice reckoning, these are truly extraordinary times. And there's tremendous need in our communities right now because of COVID-19 crisis in particular. But of course, as we know, that crisis has bared inequities that have existed for a long time. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that over these next few minutes that we have together. But of course, we've realized over these last 6 or 7 months, and something that we've also known before, which is there's tremendous power when we join together. The work made possible by the Community Investment Tax Credit really stands out as a public and private partnership that represents the incredible good that can happen when individual philanthropy, government, nonprofits, and corporations come together. COVID-19 is a crisis that has impacted everyone, and while some of us have been able to work from home, as we know, so many of our neighbors are making difficult trade-offs between paying their rent, putting food on their table, and keeping kids engaged in remote learning. The state unemployment rate, not a surprise to this group, has skyrocketed from 2.4 up to a point as high as nearly 33% in hard-hit cities like Lynn and Lawrence. That's pushing more than 330,000 families into an even deeper financial crisis. And at the same time, critical early education and out-of-school time programs that families rely on have had to close, and many haven't been able to reopen, or certainly reopen at the capacities or levels that they were at before. And this has illuminated and widened the existing cracks in our human services safety net and our education systems like no other point in our history. But it also provides us with a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-generation opportunity to reimagine how we meet the needs of our most vulnerable residents and empower communities to emerge stronger, more equitable, and more prepared for the future. The resources that are generated and leveraged by the Community Investment Tax Credit in partnership with the Commonwealth and the Baker administration has accelerated the ability for community development corporations to activate critical emergency relief efforts and to play a critical role in the economic recovery efforts across cities and neighborhoods statewide. And at the same time, it provides tax benefits to donors. Thanks to the legislature, I know we have several representatives and members of their teams from the House and Senate here joining us today, and we welcome them and thank them for being here. This tax credit has been expanded and extended through 2025. So we're grateful for the work of our legislature to move this and to expand the potential impact for this. So whether it's helping small business recover from the COVID-19 recession, stabilizing our neighborhoods, or providing direct services to individuals and families, CDCs have responded in heroic ways to the health crisis and the economic repercussions that have reverberated throughout our communities. The CITC has helped CDCs build the necessary internal capacity, add and expand programs and services, increase their community engagement, and leverage additional public and private funding to do their work. United Way is incredibly proud to mobilize support and serve as the lead fundraiser for the Community Investment Tax Credit. And to date, we've raised more than $12 million from close to 600 donors, and a number of those donors are on this call with us today, and we welcome them as well. Today, you'll hear about how the CITC is powering the important work of CDCs in communities like Lawrence and Chelsea, two of the cities that have felt the impact of COVID-19 like no others, and two of the communities that have been incredibly well led through this entire pandemic as well. I'd like to welcome Jess Anders, Executive Director of Lawrence Community Works, to say a few words and introduce our next guest. Jess is a leader who's committed to partnerships and impact in ways that truly embody the spirit of living united. A champion of her city's resilience, Jess and her team at Lawrence Community Works are always striving to empower residents in their journey to overcome this financial crisis and achieve financial stability. With that, I hand it over to Jess.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. That was an awesome introduction. It's like started my day off right, which is good because it's challenging out here. And I guess the first thing I wanted to say on this call, well, number one, thank you so much to all of the donors who are on this call who might not even live in Lawrence or Chelsea or some of our communities, but have cared enough to invest their time and their resources in the work that we're doing, which I think makes a stronger Commonwealth and society for all of us. So thank you for that. And second, I just have to give a shout out to my other fellow CDC partners, both within Lawrence, Groundwork Lawrence, ACT Lawrence, and Mill Cities Community Investments, who are some of the amazing partners that we all work so closely together here in Lawrence on all of these issues that we could not address these challenges alone. And so even though I'm the one speaking, please know that it is such a vital team effort here. And I know that that happens in other cities like Chelsea and Revere, where my esteemed colleague Raphael is leading the work as well. So I just want to briefly echo some of Bob's words. Like, what this crisis has really done is just laid bare some of the vulnerabilities and inequities that have already existed in our communities. And I think some of the issues that we as a group have been working most closely on here revolve around housing instability and food insecurity. Those have been two of the top issues that we've dealt with as a collaborative here in the community. We have a standing meeting that we do every Monday where we're coordinating resources and efforts, you know, whether it's fundraising together, planning together, implementing programs together, figuring things out, sharing data, anything that we can do to get the best resources to the most people. And we have also, with the United Way's incredible support, had a very strong focus on the undocumented community here, because these are incredibly hardworking families who drive our economy. They're doing all of those jobs that nobody else wants to do, the cleaning and the cooking and the gardening and, you know, all of those other jobs in our city and our region, the lower skilled manufacturing jobs and service jobs. And those folks have been hit so hard by this and had really no other recourse. So we've been focusing very much on getting food to people, being creative about supporting local residents to cook food for people, getting rental assistance to people, and linking all of that financial assistance to counseling and coaching so that we're helping people set up for the long term, because we know that our families are very aspirational and they want to invest in their future. So we try and work from people's strengths as a group, and that's really the thing that we do best, I think, in Lawrence, is invest in the skills and talents and capacity that the community already has in order to give it a stronger base for the future. But your support is really critical in all of that, in making some of that possible, to hire the staff or to get the direct cash assistance into the hands of a family that just needs something to weather the crisis and be able to get back on their feet. And I guess, you know, for me, the final piece in all of this puzzle of how we're going to emerge from this stronger is leadership. And I just can't say enough good words about the next speaker, our mayor, Dan Rivera. He has, I mean, in good times, he's an awesome leader. He's the mayor who you'll find out there like on the snowplow with the guys in the snowstorm, making sure that they're doing the right streets and, things are getting done. He's the one that, everyone in the city has his cell phone number and will call directly when they have a problem and need something. But he's also, without a doubt, the guy that you want on your side when things go crazy downriver and we have a crisis to deal with, and he just steps up in a no drama, pragmatic, what do we need to do to get the job done way. And it's really just a pleasure to work with him and to work alongside him. He has no territorialism. He disregards boundaries in that way and just brings everyone together and tries to make this a whole community effort to get the best solution that we can for everybody. So I really want to applaud and underscore his leadership in this time and in the good times as well, and just say how proud I am to have him for my mayor, and introduce Mr. Dan Rivera.
Thank you, Jess. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Thanks to the United Way, MACDCs, and all the folks who put this thing together. These conversations are really important, especially in these times where there's so much uncertainty. I think that Jess talked a lot about the success we've had in the role of leadership here in Lawrence, but I think that if you were paying attention to what she said before she introduced me, and you understand the role that the other Lawrence-based CBOs play in this organization and an organization across the state, you'll know how easy they make my life. Whether it's Groundwork Lawrence or ACT or MCCI, it doesn't matter, or LCW, it doesn't matter which one of them are the ones doing the work. They're making Lawrence people's lives better every day, and in turn make my life easier because I don't have to figure out how to do it. I just do what they say. And I don't know if you notice, there's a trend, they're all female leaders. And so I'm just desperately afraid of them. And I say that oftentimes as a joke about, maybe being beat up, but I really say I'm more afraid of letting them down. And so we work really hard to make sure that we do the best we can. And I'm glad to be here. I think there's going to be questions. Are there questions or did you just keep talking? I thought somebody was going to ask me questions, Bob. I'm sorry. I can't hear you for some reason.
You're on mute, Bob.
I can keep talking. That's the easy part.
Sorry about that. I accidentally muted myself. Nope. You still have time left to continue talking, Mr. Mayor. If you'd like.
I think about all the stuff that we've been through in the city of Lawrence, and the good and bad news is that we were kind of ready for this COVID-19 pandemic in a way that other communities weren't, because of the bad that we went through 2 years ago in the gas crisis. And I used to make this joke with the mayor of Boston. And when he got elected the first year, he was every week, every day, there was like an announcement, the new chief of something. Chief of police, the chief of equity, the chief of human services, transportation, and we were at a breakfast together. And the guy who drove me in, only because it was such an early start, I don't usually have a driver. My friend Orlando, he was with me, so I made a joke. I said, "This is my new chief of diversity," and I had Orlando stand up. And then the chief of transportation, I had Orlando stand up, and I did like 7 times. It was funny the first 5 times. But you can imagine getting hit with a gas crisis where you had to empty half the city onto the street, and not having the wherewithal, having big city problems without having a big city budget or staff. And I asked the nonprofits led by the CDCs and Groundwork Lawrence to come together and create the nonprofit working group and just think about the stuff that we weren't thinking about, and talk about and make sure that people were being treated appropriately, and make sure they had everything from showers to food, to coloring books at the shelters, and a path to home, and all those things, and the undocumented in our community. It was an incredible incredible relief to be able to throw the ball to a group of people that took that ball and really took it to the hole and really provided services. And I think that legacy that muscle memory was there when we hit this big wall. You know, again, the Lawrence is about seventh, I think the seventh largest city in the Commonwealth, and our budget is not commensurate with the size and the need of the community. And so the work that they do in terms of the money that is given to those folks is incredibly important. And so I want to join Jess in thanking you desperately for that type of investment. You will feel that it will not go to waste here. It will not go to waste here. Even if a nonprofit gets $1 and they waste it, everybody talks about it, and it will not happen again. And so we have a real good peer group, and I dare say a group, community of pride and shame to make sure that everybody does what they're supposed to do. You know, it's been the pride of my life to be the mayor of my city and be here during the time that it's been the most needy. But, you know, if I hadn't had, Groundwork Lawrence working with the center, which is our it used to be the senior center, but we're trying to make it a bigger, more encompassing center to make sure that food is being provided. If it wasn't for Jess and her team talking about housing and making sure that that's being done, ACT also doing that training around housing and making sure the people of the Arlington district are not forgotten. That stuff to me is incredibly important in times when people don't know where to turn. And when you come from Guatemala or Dominican Republic and you look to have a better life in a society that's supposed to be a first world society, and then you have a disaster followed by a public health disaster, I'm not really sure those new immigrants have decided they've made the right decision. It's probably the first time in American society that the immigrants probably thought, maybe I should go back. But they're not. And that's the good news about Lawrence. I mean, Lawrence has an accent, always had an accent, just happened to be a brogue or an Italian accent back at the turn of the century. And today, the previous turn of the century. And today it's, Guatemalan, Dominican kids talking in Spanish. And we're so prideful of that. The deep services that are provided because of these organizations mean that we create an ecosystem in this community where you can come in at the lowest rung in American society, find a place to live. Maybe you're lucky enough to go live at the duck mill, or get a job early on because you get training from the ACT or one of the other organizations, and your kids go to a school system. Jess sits on the proxy school board here in the city of Lawrence, the Lawrence Educational Alliance, which is the receivership board. And so we're making sure that we have a good school system. So you can come in at the lowest rung, your kids can go to school, you can get yourself a good job, and then at the end of the day, make sure that you're progressing and reach the dream why people come to this country. But I can't say enough about the work these organizations do in behalf of the city. I said before in a conversation with Secretary Keneally that I think the most important letters in the economic development alphabet are CDCs and NGOs. I mean, like you can't get it done. And when anybody who's a conservative market force person says, well, the market could do, well, the market hasn't done anything. Or these buildings wouldn't be empty, or these people's bellies wouldn't be empty, and people wouldn't be dying for $15 an hour wage. And so we know that the marketplace has flaws, and that the CDCs and the NGOs of this community pick it up. And so if you're a donor, you're on this call, and you're feeling like, yeah, I do give, and it's something that I do every year. Know that you're filling that gap that we have as a society, and it's not, you can't understate it. You can't really understate it. The virus has been different because it's been public health, and I don't know anybody in 4 generations has had to deal with this problem, and no one really knows which way to go. But again, the community health centers and their partnerships have been helpful, and then the CDCs and NGOs again have been. The nonprofits have been very important in making sure people and kids are being taken care of. It's a lonely place to be the mayor of a city that has a lot of need and very little resources, made only less lonely by the work that the nonprofits in our community do. And I count them as friends and peers. And anytime I have a real problem, I always call on them. And luckily, they answer my call. And that's why I readily answer their calls. So know that the money that's being sent down through United Way and other organizations and the tax credit is really, really important. They couldn't do this work without that type of support. And I think at the end of the day, like Jess was saying, our society is better, our Commonwealth is better because we have these strong organizations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I hope that calls like this today help you feel a little bit less lonely in the work that you're doing. You've got a community of folks that have their arms wrapped around you and our communities that are working through this. I heard a couple of things in both yours and Jess's comments that I think are powerful to just lift out. And the first is partnership. And I think the CITC is sort of built around partnership between philanthropists and community organizations, CDCs. And it was great to hear both you and Jess talk about how much stronger we are as a result of coming together and working together through this, and hope that kind of, and believe deeply that kind of collaboration and connection that's being built at this time is something that will continue to strengthen many of our communities like Lawrence, like Lynn, like Chelsea.
Bob, I forgot to mention on the CITC thing, it's like, people have to give a big amount and you feel like, oh man, I'm not going to really feel it till I get to do my taxes. But because you do it at the end of the year, really you only got to wait till April to get your half of your money back. And I think that's really cool because, sometimes you make donations in January and February and you're like, I don't even remember making that donation. And so it's cool that you do it at the end of the year, you get that in there and you get paid by April. That's not bad. Yeah, no, it's not a bad turnaround, right? And you get the immediate impact of the change that you're making with that investment as well. And you all are demonstrating how important that is. And so I'm grateful for your being here today and for your leadership in Lawrence and the example that you're setting for communities across the Commonwealth about how to lead and how to make sure that with a crisis we come out on the other side better, stronger than we were when we got started. So thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you. I now want to turn it over to Raphael Meyers, the executive director of the neighborhood developers. United Way has had quite standing in solidarity with the neighborhood developers, the city of Chelsea, since the very early onset of the COVID-19 crisis. But we've been long-term partners in providing economic mobility and stability to individuals and families. The city of Chelsea could not and would not sit on the sidelines during this crisis. Like I mentioned before, both Mayor Rivera and the city leadership in Chelsea and a number of other communities have really stepped up and stepped into the challenges. And United Way has been a proud partner with both communities through the One Lawrence Fund and the One Chelsea Fund, which have raised funds to provide financial assistance to people in need, especially those who'd otherwise fall through the cracks of our social safety net. And so with that, I'm excited to hand it over to Raphael and to thank you, Raphael, for all you've done to lead throughout this crisis.
Thank you, Bob. In some ways, I don't need to speak. Jess just described very well what things look like in Chelsea, even though she was talking about Lawrence. It's actually remarkable how similar our experience is, both in terms of the challenges and the need and the response and how important collaboration and partnership is. Collaboration partnership is really critical in Chelsea and Revere in non-pandemic times, but when the pandemic hit, all the relationships that we had really paid off because none of us could have responded alone. And I see Lawrence really as a model for that. I had the honor to spend some time there and work a little bit before I went to the neighborhood developers, and the work that you guys do is incredible. And the mayor's comments also resonate with our experience in Chelsea. I'm going to take a different slice so I don't repeat what Jess said and talk about another aspect of our work that probably has a corollary in Lawrence. Chelsea was hit really hard by COVID-19, as probably many of you have followed in the news. It was the community that was hit hardest in the Commonwealth. We have about 92 confirmed COVID-19 cases per 1,000 residents. That's higher than any community in the Commonwealth and higher than all the zip codes in New York City. Revere was hit pretty hard too. It's also one of the top communities, but not quite as hard as Chelsea. There was a point where Revere was, I think, the second highest in terms of unemployment rate in Massachusetts during the pandemic. But what's interesting is that before the pandemic, it had a unemployment rate of about 2.9%, which is very similar to the state average, but then it shot up to 25.6%. And we had a similar experience in Chelsea. So in addition to the public health impact of COVID-19, our communities have been hit very, very hard economically as well. But going back to the public health impact, there was a point during the pandemic where we started to notice a pattern that we should have expected, but quite frankly weren't really thinking about at the time, which is that in our own properties, we had a much lower number of confirmed COVID-19 cases than in the surrounding community. We provide affordable, subsidized housing. We have 968 apartments in Chelsea alone. And as of today, we have learned of 12 confirmed cases. That's a rate. The surrounding community has a rate that is about 7 times, a little bit more than 7 times as high as the rate in our apartments in Chelsea. I have a similar experience in Revere where we have 2 confirmed cases, so the sample is a little smaller, and the rate in Revere is not quite as high as in Chelsea, but it's still 5 times lower than the surrounding community. And while our resident services staff is doing excellent work calling everybody, every tenant, and making sure that their needs are met, while our property management company is doing an incredible job when residential managing these properties, we attribute this to a different factor, which is that people in our community have felt the pressures of increased rents and property values for quite a while. And in order to be able to stay in Chelsea and Revere, what they've done is they've doubled up with other people. There are sometimes 2, 3-bedroom apartments that have 3 households in them. People share kitchens, bathrooms, and that's tough. But what it means during a pandemic is that the virus has a chance to spread much faster. So when you get home and you see so many people in a small space, the virus just has a much better chance to spread. And that's how we explain the difference. In our apartments, since they're affordable, there's really no need to double up. There's also tighter regulations that incentivize both the tenant and the landlord to make sure that they're healthy living situations. So I was reluctant to talk about that at first because I didn't want to jinx it, but it's really something worth talking about because it stresses how important affordable housing development is. And I don't think that experience, while maybe magnified by our numbers in Chelsea, is any different for other CDCs around the state or country for that matter. So what have we done sort of to respond to the economic crisis? We had to shift what we do. We had to move downstream somewhat reluctantly, but we really had no choice. When I say that, I mean that usually we're trying to elevate people's voices. We're trying to we're trying to help people in ways that are sustainable and long-lasting, along the lines of policy change, along the lines of financial mobility. But when the pandemic hit, there were literally lines of people outside food pantries trying to have access to the most basic need, food. And so we partnered with the various food pantries and helped in the ways that we could. For one, we provided volunteers and staff so that they could scale up. For another, when they ran out of their space, we were able to make space available. We have a property that is going to be developed into affordable housing in the future, but we're still waiting for a subsidy for that property. So we've made that available. And then we also have properties that are in use where we have community rooms and space outside that can be used to distribute food. So we have the honor to partner with others and to play that role and to help meet the need, the incredibly increased need for access to food. This is really a good moment to thank the United Way. Without your partnership, we wouldn't have been able to do any of this. When the pandemic hit, you were there right away, thinking through with us what the needs are, what the new responses are, and you really acted swiftly. You mentioned, Bob, you mentioned the One Chelsea Fund. Between us and our partners, I think we've given out $1.4 million to the One Chelsea Fund. T&D, with other resources from United Way and others in Chelsea and Revere, has given out about $600,000 so far in emergency assistance. Very flexible funds where the application is very simple and where the money flows really quickly, which is what was needed really badly. It still is, to be honest. And then we created a hotline where people can call us and get assistance in applying for public benefits. Those are much harder to access because the application process. And we have helped people apply for unemployment insurance, SNAP, rental assistance, stimulus payment. We help people prepare their taxes virtually so they can get their earned income tax credit. And we've created a value so far of about $2.5 million for our communities. And I'm really in awe of what our team was able to do to shift what they were doing and do all that work from at home, as Bob described before, while remote learning is going on for some of them, for their children. And we've really been able to make a difference in that. So I just, I think that gives you a really good overview, and all this couldn't be done with the support of donors like you. The general operating funds that come through CITCs are really what was needed to be able to adjust quickly during this pandemic and shift what we were doing, because when we apply for grants, they have specific deliverables attached to it. When you make a donation through CITC, we can use it whichever way it is needed the most. And nobody would have predicted that we would spend our time the way we're spending it right now at the beginning of the year. I think you're on mute, Bob.
Mute again. Thank you. I've got some background noise here, so I wanted to mute myself. Thank you so much, Raphael, for your insights and for your leadership that you've provided. And we're proud to be partners with you in this work, and look forward to the work that we have to do ahead to continue to strengthen Chelsea and the surrounding communities. So thank you so much. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and co-champion in this work relative to CDCs and CITCs, and that's Joe Kreuzberg, the president and CEO of the Massachusetts Association of Community Development Corporations. It's safe to say, if it weren't for Joe's leadership on the creation and the establishment of the CITC here in Massachusetts, we wouldn't have this event today, and we wouldn't have all of this incredible impact that we've already heard that the CITC has brought to bear on behalf of our Commonwealth, and has enabled CDCs to step up and provide food assistance, emergency financial assistance to residents, have helped to mitigate the spread of the disease by working with public health organizations, and really connect residents to COVID-19 testing and the availability of PPE for residents and communities. So we're grateful for Joe for your leadership, and happy to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, everybody. I'm delighted to be here this morning. Thanks for joining us. And it was great to hear about what was going on in Lawrence and Chelsea, and I think it's emblematic of what's been going on around the state. My job, I think, is to give a little 101 course on the community investment tax credit in just a few minutes. For some of you, this might be a refresher, and for some of you, it might be new. So hopefully it is helpful for everybody. So go to the next slide. We just like to start with this quote because, we just think this is a win-win program for everybody. And, for those of us who have participated as donors, I have a great feeling to feel like you can double your impact, and that really is a motivating factor, we hope, for many people, and we have seen that over the years. So go ahead to the next slide, and we'll get into exactly how this whole thing works. So the community investment tax credit, this language here is straight from the statute as it was adopted by the legislature in 2012. And you notice we very intentionally start with local residents and stakeholders as the subject of the sentence, not the object of the sentence. CITC is all about local people creating a vision for their community and making it happen. And it starts with the local folks. They're just the recipients of services and benefits. They are the enablers, the actors, taking agency over their own lives and over the future of their own community. And that's really what drives this program. And so that's why this sentence starts with local residents and stakeholders. The rest of us are here to help them. But this is their show. And as you can see, it's all about public-private partnership, and it's intended to benefit communities of all types across the Commonwealth. Next slide. So what are CDCs? CDCs are nonprofit organizations. They're community development corporations. They're mission-driven, and they're dedicated to creating places of opportunity where all people can live with dignity while participating in and benefiting from our economy. There are specific criteria that CDCs have to fit in order to be certified by the Department of Housing and Community Development. They have to have a board that is governed by local residents and local community members. They have to be dedicated to community development and lifting up economic opportunity for low and moderate income people. They do that. We use this little graph to show some of the ways that CDCs typically work to do this, although it looks quite different from community to community. We start over here with building communities. And that's the idea, is strengthening the civic infrastructure of a community, recruiting, training, and supporting local leaders, because it all starts with the people. And then we believe strongly in improving the built environment, improving the physical place through housing and economic development. We know there's great evidence that the built environment affects life outcomes, but we don't stop with the physical environment. CDCs are also involved in working to transform lives through adult education, through entrepreneurship training, through homeownership education, providing services to young people and seniors alike. We're both about the place and the people. Sometimes those things are pitted against each other, but when CDCs are working at their highest capacity, as the ones in Lawrence and Chelsea do, they're working both to improve the physical place and to lift people up. Next slide. So what is the community investment tax credit? It's really quite simple. A tax credit starts to intimidate people sometimes, but it's simply a 50% donation tax credit for qualified contributions to selected CDCs. And we'll get into what those words mean in a second. There is a statewide cap on these credits. It's not unlimited. The cap right now is $8 million. Next year it goes up to $10 million. And that ensures that the cost to the state is controlled. And by making it competitive, we think that drives quality. There is a minimum donation of $1,000. There's no maximum anymore. And CITC donations can support a broad array of community development efforts. It's not just for housing or just for business development. Most donations come in as unrestricted support, as Raphael alluded to, which is really important. But donors can specify that they want it for a particular purpose. That's up to the donor and the CDC. Next slide. So who can make a donation? Pretty much anybody. Individuals, partnerships, corporations. We often get asked, can donor advised funds make a CITC donation? Yes. In which case the tax benefit returns to the fund itself, to be then presumably given out again to somebody else. Nonprofits can do it, and a nonprofit will just receive a refund from the state or a check back from the state. And even non-residents. So if you live in Florida or New York, but also have a connection to Massachusetts, you can make a CITC donation, fill out a tax return here in Massachusetts, and you'll get a check from the Commonwealth, assuming you don't owe any taxes here. And we've had many people do that. So everybody can participate. This slide here shows how much money comes from different kinds of donors. You see individuals as the biggest slice. And this is in dollars. If we actually went by count of donations, the individual slice would be much, much bigger, probably over half the pie. You can see foundations and financial institutions are the next two largest donors. I'll point out that health services is actually starting to grow as more and more people recognize the connection between community development and health. Next slide. So what counts? Cash contribution. We tried to keep it really simple. The Department of Revenue is very determined to keep this simple. So it has to be a cash contribution, can't be stocks, can't be real estate, can't be a car, has to be cash. It has to be an unconditional delivery of cash. There can be no quid pro quo, no exchange transaction going on. The credit is taken in the year that the donation is made. So somebody made the reference, if you make it by December 31st, then you can claim the credit for tax year 2020. If you're a nonprofit or an institution with a different tax year, then it's based on your tax year if you're a fiscal year entity. And again, the minimum qualified investment is $1,000. Next slide. So what has CITC done? Well, it's really strengthened the field. It's had a huge impact over the last several years in at least these three areas of community engagement. One of the core goals of CITC was to strengthen the ability of CDCs to work with local residents and engage them and build their leadership. And we've seen a lot of CDCs invest the dollars in that type of work. Obviously, most of the money goes to support various programs, housing services, business development, job training, youth services, and so forth. And also some of the CDCs, actually all of them, I would say, have also used it just to build their internal capacity. Information technology has been a huge focus for the last several years. Many CDCs have used these dollars to build that infrastructure, which has come in extremely important during the pandemic. Communication has been another area of focus in the last several years as CDCs have really tried to ramp up their ability to tell their story, document their impact, and communicate with stakeholders. Again, something that's even more important now. Next slide. These are just some numbers. Every year, MACDC surveys all of the recipients or all the participants in this program to see what the results are. And as you can see for 2019, last year for which we have data, there were 1,543 homes built or preserved, over 4,000 job opportunities created or preserved, over 1,000 entrepreneurs we worked with. And probably the number that tells the biggest story is that $918 million of total investment, nearly $1 billion of investment. And keep in mind, the tax credit is $8 million, and we're generating $1 billion of activity. Next slide. This just shows the growth of the program over the last several years. Some of that growth is attributed to the fact that the statewide cap, has gone from $3 to $6 to $8 million. 2019 was a record year. We are very much hoping and expecting that 2020 will be a record year. The community has really responded to the needs that the pandemic has generated. And so we've had some real success. So far, we don't see too much drop off. So we're hoping to crack that 12 million and maybe get close to 14 this year, but we'll have to see. Next slide. Oh, well, that's the kind of housing we build with solar panels and everything and beautiful paint jobs. So we're excited about this program. This program, as Bob mentioned, is going to be around at least till 2025 and hopefully beyond. And what has really been strong about this program, and I'll cue up our next speaker a little bit, is that it's built on partnership between the government sector, the private sector, and the community. And no CDC can succeed in this program. No CDC can raise money through this program. No CDC can thrive if they're not able to leverage that partnership to work effectively with government, to work effectively with private sector, and have support at the local level. And when we designed this program, when we created it, we looked at who are the best CDCs in America, what are their attributes, and that's what we found. The best CDCs in America have strong partnerships with government, engage the business community and the private sector, and have deep roots in the community. That's the secret sauce. And so we built this program to leverage that secret sauce and get it everywhere in Massachusetts. And it's proven to be a very effective model. And we're delighted to have the United Way as our core partner in building this program out across the state. And if later there's time, I'm happy to take any questions or offline as well. Thank you.
All right.
Am I handing it off to the next speaker? I'm happy to do.
You are.
Our next speaker is somebody that we've worked with quite a bit over the last 7 months. This administration has been a supporter of CITC from before it was this administration. I mean, during his first campaign, Governor Baker met with us and really understood right away, totally got it. This is the kind of program that he likes because of the public-private partnership and the impact that it has. So when the current secretary took office, we met, we talked about it. He's been a strong supporter. He's been getting the allocations out quickly and effectively. And I do want to say, just throughout this pandemic, I don't know how many times we've talked or how many times the secretary has talked with our members in various parts of the state, but he always has an open mind. He's always interested in learning more. And he's been such a champion and advocate for small businesses, for affordable housing, for community development. We're really grateful to have the friendship and partnership that we have. And thank you for joining us today, Mr. Secretary. The floor is yours.
All right. Joe, thank you for the really kind introduction. Great to be with you all today. Joe and Bob and Raphael. I see Mayor Rivera, Rep. Minicucci. Gosh, who else is out there? Friends from Lawrence, Jess and Heather. Just wonderful to be with you all here today. And I want to talk a little bit about my experience working with the CDCs. And I have to say, I've been secretary now almost 2 years, and my work and involvement and engagement with the CDCs has just been spectacular. That they are such important partners. I mean, literally for everything we try to get done within housing and economic development, and your work around affordable housing, job training, financial literacy, childcare, workforce. I can't say enough about the incredible work our CDCs do all across Massachusetts. I truly don't know where we'd be without the CDCs in good times. And I truly have no idea where we'd be without the CDCs over these last 7 months. It's just been, I can't say enough about it, Joe, you and all your colleagues in the CDC world. It's been a real joy getting to know these organizations better over my 2 years as secretary. And it's been so important to have the kind of dialogue you talked about these last 7 months as we tackled some really incredible challenges. So big thanks to you and all your work. And we've got a lot more work to be done, obviously. You know, we in 2019, we went through an exercise largely similar to what we did in 2015, which is come up with an economic development plan for the state. And we traveled the state. We did a lot of these big kind of regional engagement sessions, heard from a lot of people, and we came up with a plan and we called it Partnerships for Growth. And we all love that title because it speaks to how we all try to work together here in Massachusetts to get important things done. And when you think about the work of the CDCs and you think about the CITC, and it's meant to foster the kind of engagement Joe talked about between really among all parties, state government, local government, the community, the private sector. One of the reasons we love this program is it does help foster those kinds of partnerships. And we've been strong proponents, as Joe mentioned, of the CITC program, and thrilled to see the kind of resources it's brought into the CDCs. I wasn't quite aware of those numbers. Those are bigger numbers than I might have guessed. It was great to see them, and great to see the success this program has had. Of course, we had a great event. Seems like a very long time ago, back in June of 2019, out in the Hill Towns in Chesterfield to celebrate the CITC allocations of that year. But great to see that the extent to which the tax credits are utilized and providing real value and real help as the CDCs execute their important work. But this theme of partnership is just so important. It was really important in relatively good economic times. When we put together our plan, we saw we had to get some important things done to fill certain gaps in our economy. And now, of course, COVID-19 hit. So we got a lot of work to do together around what we're calling now economic recovery. And I thought I might touch on a few points that are really top of mind for us as we now we're well along on the reopening process. And I do want to thank Joe and his colleagues for their assistance during reopening, coming up with our reopening strategy. It's a process I co-led with the Lieutenant Governor on a reopening advisory board. But as we're now deeper into the reopening process, we're thinking much more about economic recovery and what does that mean. And there's really, 5 key areas we're talking about. One is around housing. You know, we were using the term housing crisis long before we knew what COVID-19 was. We've had enormous housing challenges here in Massachusetts. Those challenges have only been worsened by COVID-19. We have real housing stability challenges in ways we hadn't had before. I hope folks saw the announcement this week of the eviction diversion initiative and really a bit of a call to action here to help us spread the word about our RAFT program, our IRMA programs, and others, making sure folks know they can call 211 to get assistance with housing. But housing stability and equity will be fundamental in our thoughts on recovery over these coming weeks and months in the next couple of years. We need to revitalize our downtowns. Our main streets have been really hard hit by the pandemic and the steps we took to close parts of our economy early on. So from a community
Mr. Secretary, you seem to have frozen up. The state's bandwidth is not quite good enough, it seems like. I don't know if you can hear us.
I tried to turn off his video to see if that would help, but he seems to be completely gone dark.
Yeah.
Joe, there was a question for you in the chat. Maybe you can take that right now.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that.
What happens to the tax credit when the cap is exceeded, Joe, is the question from Bob.
Okay, yeah, good question. So we have lots of systems in place to make sure it doesn't get exceeded, I guess is the answer. We've never had it actually happen, but each CDC receives an allocation this year up to $200,000, and it's the CDC's responsibility to keep track so that they don't award a tax credit to somebody that they don't have. So when the CDC has expended all of its tax credits, it can no longer solicit or accept such donations. And so far the CDCs have done that. There may have, if by some chance the CDC made a mistake and accepted a donation when they were already expended, it would be first come, first serve, and they'd have to go back to that donor and return the funds.
Well, if that happens, that will only prove the importance and the demand for a higher cap in the future. So,
I was just going to say, when we get there, then we just have to start advocating for a higher cap, right?
That's right. That's right.
And the donor doesn't have to take the money back, right?
Correct. No, the donor, I think a good faith thing to do would be to offer that back to the donor. Maybe the donor will take half the money back because they're losing the half that would have been the tax credit, if they were basing their amount on that. The CDC could also refer them to another CDC, I suppose. But again, I think Mike might be coming back by phone now. Is that you, Mike?
Hey, Joe, I'm back on. Yeah.
There we go.
Can you hear me okay?
We can. We can.
We had kind of a Wi-Fi issue here at the office. I apologize. And I don't know where I left off. I was talking about economic recovery.
Mm-hmm.
I think you had just started to outline the plan going forward.
Okay, thank you. So housing, I don't know if I touched on housing, but we have real challenges around housing equity and stability during this period of time. I hope folks saw the announcement of the eviction diversion initiative earlier this week by the governor. Ask you to help spread the word about our rental assistance programs and the fact that folks can call 211 for help if they have housing stability issues. But we have a lot of challenges around housing. We've had a housing crisis here in Massachusetts for some time now, and the CDCs have been great partners and advocates with us around trying to address that crisis. But we have enormous housing challenges now during the time of the pandemic. We need to spend time focused on our main streets, revitalizing our downtowns. Our main street companies have obviously been very hard hit by COVID-19, and so you'll see us come forward with some programs and thoughts on downtown and main street development. Getting people back to work will be a vitally important part of our work. We lost 1 million jobs. We've gained about 500,000 of those jobs back, but there remain hundreds of thousands of people that are unemployed, and trying to find new workforce skills pathways for those folks will be incredibly important. And then finally, addressing the needs of our small companies. And you saw some news in the budget the governor refiled yesterday with additional supports for small businesses. I know the CDCs have been incredible partners helping to address the needs of our smallest companies during this time. And that'll be a core part of the overall economic recovery strategy as well. So I hope that provides some context in our thoughts now as we are well along in reopening and thinking more meaningfully about what does an economic recovery strategy for Massachusetts look like.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary, for joining us this morning and for your leadership and for your persistence and jumping back on and finishing up with us. We're grateful for the leadership that you've shown and that the Governor Baker has shown throughout this entire pandemic. And we're appreciative of the leadership of our legislature as well, particularly as it pertains to our work around the CITC, but also through the last 6 or 7 months. We really can't argue with the fact that our Commonwealth's public leaders have done everything that they can to keep us safe through this period and to ensure that our neighbors and our neighborhoods are safe and strong and make it through this. And so to Mayor Rivera, thank you for joining us. Raphael, Jess, Joe, it was great to share this last hour with you all. And I hope that this provides an opportunity to see that truly together we can help our communities overcome this public health and economic crisis and rebuild and build a stronger, more equitable, resilient Commonwealth. And so I encourage anyone, if you have questions about the CITC, to follow up with those of us at United Way, with Joe and his team at MACDC, or to any of the individual CDC folks that have joined us this morning. Remember that donations to community development corporations through the CITC help us to sustain the emergency response, but at the same time, building stronger communities across the Commonwealth. So thank you everyone for joining us this morning and for participating, and have a wonderful day and remainder of your week.
Thank you, Bob.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It's great
Thank
to be
you.
here.